How's everybody doing this Friday? Welcome to another episode of the Armchair Crew Chief. My name is Jordan, and we are here coming to a close of the halfway of the NASCAR season. Fox is no more after this week for the 2024 Cup Series and Xfinity. This is actually the last race coming up Saturday that they will actually be broadcasting, because the CW has been taking over starting on the playoffs this year for broadcasting Xfinity races exclusively. So it's a big change going on. We'll see what happens with our broadcast. You've heard us talk about it here, and a lot of other people talk about how poor Fox has been broadcasting the Cup Series races, and it's felt like an embarrassment in my opinion. But let's go ahead and dive in. We also had some big news come out with Stewart-Haas, as we've been talking about. So let's just dive in on what has been going on here. We're going to start off with our race results and information, starting with the Toyota 200 from St. Louis Worldwide Technology Raceway. Our qualifying, our top five were Tanner Gray, Dean Thompson, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes, Ty Majeski. At the end of Stage 1, we had Corey Heim, 5th, Stuart Friesen, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes, Ty Majeski. And then Stage 2, Corey Heim, Ben Rhodes, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes, Ty Majeski. So Majeski swept everything, the two stages there. And then we get into going into our final recap here of the race. But before we go into that, the racing overall was fairly clean. Only 5 cautions, including the 2 for the stages. We had one car spin on lap 11. We had an incident lap 47, and then an incident on lap 130. And I don't know what it is. So our top 5 were Lane Riggs, Ty Majeski, Nick Sanchez, Christian Eckes, and Corey Heim. Corey Heim has been dominating this year. I would not be surprised if we see him hoisting the trophy in Phoenix in November, whenever the season comes to an end. So I would not be surprised if we see him. He has been running and just running away with it. It feels like, he's not there with the points. As you saw, Majeski was running and he won the stage points, but overall, we're looking at Corey Heim. He led 65 laps, and we go to Majeski 43. And so Majeski's putting himself in the right place at the right time so he can get his playoff points. But Corey Heim is sitting out there and just going after everybody else. He led the 65. Majeski led 43 with the next. And then Tanner Gray ran some laps, 19 I think it was, he led. So, I think it's going to be Corey Heim's to lose. And, moving on from there, going into the Pacific Office Automation 147. This was the race for the Xfinity Series. They were actually out in Portland on road racing, and our qualifying for this race, top 5, Allgaier, Custer, Herbst, SVG, and Sam Mayer. So this is one of those spots that we were looking at to see if Shane Van Gisbergen could come out and just prove what he did down in Australia with the supercars. And he didn't disappoint. Top 5 for Stage 1 was Parker Kligerman, Josh Bilicki, Sheldon Creed, Riley Herbst, Justin Allgaier. Stage 2, we had Shane Van Gisbergen, Cole Custer, Josh Bilicki, Sheldon Creed, Justin Allgaier. So if you're looking at that and you're thinking, where was SVG in all this? One of the very first few laps that he had, and let me see if I can find the actual lap number here. He actually spun out and caused a It was actually lap 1. Sam Mayer, Shane Van Gisbergen. I think it was Mayer got in, into the braking zone a little bit early. SVG kind of bumped into him, spun out. And he was just running. His car was loose the whole race. He was pretty much drifting. And it was pretty interesting to see some of the recap of the racing out there. We had quite a few incidences. Sam Mayer, SVG, had their incident. Cole Custer spun in turn 1 on lap 22. Parker Retzlaff spun. I mean, we're talking about a road course. I think it was either last year or the year before this thing was pouring down rain. Stage 1 was our first caution. We only had 4 cautions, but we had quite a few incidents. Sammy Smith spins on lap 33. Sieg spins. Matty D stalled, and then they just called the end of the stage. Josh Bilicki, Sage Karam got into it. Riley Herf spun. They threw another caution for debris in turn 9. And our final caution was Brandon Jones, Andre Castro, Kyle Sieg, Blaine Perkins, Ryan Ellis, Brendan Poole, Riley Herbst got into it in turn 12. And then Truex spun out. Ryan Truex, that is. So, I mean, overall, this was... You had your incidences, but fairly caution-free. Then we go into our top 5 for this race to end it. Ed Jones in the 5th spot, and then you had AJ Collig did fairly well. Josh Williams was 7th. Parker Kligerman, I know he's a big machine. He was 8th. Cole Custer 6th. Then you got Allmendinger 4th. Sammy Smith 3rd. Allgaier 2nd, and SVG 1st. And if I remember hearing correctly, I think Allgaier, it was his to lose, and it was unfortunate because of the pit strategy and how everything played out that SVG came out and he won. He showed his dominance at a road course. We'll see what happens this week. We have another road course coming up for them, and see if he can continue this. I say dominance. He led 75 laps. He led 12 laps. 46 Allgaier led. I mean, those are your 2 lap leaders for pretty much. So it was a battle between them, and we'll see what happens going forward and how it'll play out at Sonoma. See if those 2 guys are up there, trading paint again, see who can get the win. And then finally, lastly, we had the Enjoy Illinois. We're back over into the Worldwide Technology Race. So it was a very interesting setup here with the cars, not with the cars, but with the racing, with the trucks, and with Xfinity. Since they were both races, or 2 different tracks, they actually had the races somewhat. Portland started later. Trucks were supposed to start. Rain delayed the trucks. Next thing you know, you have the truck race at the same time as the Xfinity race, which, if you like watching racing, that can be tough to follow because you're sitting there flipping in between. And if you're a sports fan, you have even more to divvy up between what's going on with the playoffs, and you got Major League Baseball going on and so on. So qualifying for the Cup Series race, our top 5 were Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, Ryan Blaney, Cindric, and Michael McDowell. Fords took top 3. Toyotas followed. The closest Chevrolet was Kyle Busch at 10th. So they were not very fond of this racetrack during qualifying. Stage 1, you had top 5, Denny Hamlin, Austin Cindric, Ryan Blaney, Michael McDowell, Christopher Bell. Stage 2, Keselowski, Elliott, Blaney, Cindric, Bell. This was Christopher Bell's race to lose, and unfortunately it was out of his hands. His engine started going, and he struggled to get around to finish the race. And I mean, he had a fast car, and I think he would have won this race hands down. No arguments, anything like that. And unfortunately, his engine started expiring. Truex started pushing around. Truex got down because they came in, and low tire pressures is what is being speculated. Tire cut And everybody's equated it to the cars where Lightning sitting there pushing the King around. That's what Truex did to Seabell. So that was wild. The end of the race was wild as well, because we're sitting there. Ryan Blaney's leading. He was, we thought he was going to end up winning this race. He was kind of going away with it. And he ran out of fuel. I don't know when the last time he pitted was, but he ended up running out of fuel, and it was wild because, he only led 20 laps. But he was up there to win, and they get into taking the white flag, and he's like, I'm out of fuel. It baffled everybody, and it's like, what in the world? Come on, crew. You guys should have hopefully have had a better speculation on what was going on. So he ran out of fuel. Cindric passes him. Cindric gets his second win of his career. I think they said like an 85 winless streak. It's like, come on, guys. He won the first race at Daytona. Daytona can be a blind luck race win. It can also be, you go out there and dominate. In my opinion, I think in Cindric's case, it was just blind luck. Kind of like the same thing with McDowell. I don't want to take away from their wins because it is a win. But at the same time, the stars were all aligned for those guys to win. Anyway, our ending for the stage, ending the race, Joey Logano 5th, Tyler Reddick, Keselowski, Denny, and Cindric. Ford is on a tear here ever since North Wilkesboro, even before North Wilkesboro. And they're starting to show their strength. They have history out at Michigan coming up, and we'll see what happens from there. We're going to another road course. We're actually going second road course of the year over at Sonoma. But just to kind of recap some of the incidences and cautions that happened. So, lap 4, Cody Ware, John Hunter, Nemechek got into it. Lap 18, Cody Ware, Derek Krause in the backstretch. Stage 1 ended. Josh Berry got into it. That was unfortunate. Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch got into it. That was something very interesting to see because Busch was on the outside. He felt that Larson came up and bumped him. His hot head took over. He bumped him around, and then he started going down on Larson. Larson came up, ended up wrecking Busch. Busch did not finish. Then you have Larson who was able to finish. It's one of those things, Kyle Busch says, it was probably my fault. And I think that's one of his, turn it on, saying, his reverse psychology, I guess is what you would call it. Oh, it's probably my fault type thing. And then Larson's like, he was coming down on me. What's going on here, and so on. So anyway, that was the end of the race. As I said, Truex cut a tire, but and he said on his radio, he's like, maybe I should have spun like everybody else and I would have stayed closer on the lead lap, but I just nursed it back to the track or back to the pits. So different strategies, different thoughts, because you can tell when people sit there and will spin just because they're not getting their way. So I could see his frustration on that. Moving forward, we are going into Sonoma, as we were talking about. Sonoma has changed out their tire pack. They used to have a row of tires for their turn 11, which people bounced off fairly easily. They actually moved that to a permanent wall, or quote-unquote permanent wall, concrete down there, like you would see at construction sites on the road. They put that in there for turn 11. We'll see how that plays out with these guys turning and how it works out. I really don't know how. I mean, I could see some cars being hurt from that. I can also see, some of these other cars taking advantage that can't turn that well, and then they're able to get around. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on to our news, Kyle Weatherman got fined. He had an incident on pit road while they were at Portland. I think they said intentionally wrecking somebody or running into somebody. So he got fined for that. Moving on, various news, whether you like it or not, they're talking about electrification on NASCAR cars again. Whole new series, kind of like what Formula 1 and Formula E, so on. Not something that would take over I believe it was Dana White with the Nitro Cross. He's trying to get in. Yeah, Dana White's working a deal with NASCAR for an electric series. I think it would be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of factors in that are going to play, that it's not like in a Formula One car, open wheel racing. These cars are going to be heavy and crazy. Dale Jr. is still talking about getting a charter possibly for Cup Series racing, him and his sister. He's apparently had the idea of running an open entry. And then overall, it's one of those things that we were talking about last week. It's what's going to happen with these guys that were at Stewart-Haas. Front Row Motorsports has claimed one of the charters, as well as they had tabbed Ty Gilliland for a multi-year extension. So that's locking up. We have these ideas that we've talked about of who's going to go into 21. There's speculation that if Truex actually comes out and retires, that maybe Noah Gragson can go into the 19 or into that Joe Gibbs car. There's a lot of factors on if that would actually hold or not, with the idea of him and Ty Gibbs didn't see eye to eye racing in Xfinity, but he's got the backing of Bass Pro Shop like Truex had. So it proves to be a conundrum to see what's going to happen. That's why they call it the silly season, and how it all play out. I don't know what to think about it right now. Our point standings, we have our first person, and he's 44 points below now. And the number one spot for regular season is Truex. So we have 9 drivers with wins this season. And then we have Truex, Ty Gibbs, Bowman, Chastain, Blaney, Bubba Wallace, and Chris Buescher. Those are our point standings for the going into the playoffs. Who would go into the playoffs after St. Louis? That was 15 to 26 in the regular season. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Will we actually hit that spot where we get more than 16 winners? I don't know. It's we're looking at 11 more races, 10 more races to go. So it's possible. Will it happen? I don't. It'll be interesting to see. Also in the news, we had Kyle Larson get his waiver approved, so that he will be able to run for a playoff. That was one of those things. I think NASCAR was sitting there, and they were getting a lot of pressure from fans, from teams. They're like, hey, you allowed him to do this. You should give them this waiver. It's bringing IndyCar fans, with a small amount of IndyCar fans, into NASCAR. NASCAR huge into IndyCar. Arrow McLaren has come out and said, we would like to see Larson back next year. I think that would be awesome. Give him a chance to actually run the stinking 1,100 miles, or however you want to call it, and not call the race for high humidity. Because let's just say it was high humidity. It wasn't rain, because the track was pretty much dry. And we'll see what happens. We have some extra drivers coming in for the Toyota Save Mart 350 for Sonoma, and we'll go over the schedule here soon, and we'll get you set up for your NASCAR racing, your auto racing this weekend. But moving on, we have Kaz Grala is going to be running the 15, AJ Allmendinger is going to be running in the 16, Will Brown the 33, and Cam Waters is going to be running the 60 this weekend at Sonoma. I was looking at some of these paint schemes, and man, Josh Berry's paint scheme looks slick. So it's going to be something fun to watch. It's going to be something to see. I really like this race, Sonoma. It's one of the shorter races. Listening to Doug Yates talk, he's, I think, the president of Roush Yates Engines. They're the ones that create the Ford engines for RFK, and I believe couple of the other, I think they do for Front Row as well. But anyway, he got posed a question about, are we going to get more horsepower? What do you think about all this stuff? And he kind of parroted, I can't remember the gentleman's name who he mentioned, but he said, yeah, I see an option that we're not going back to any more horsepower, higher horsepower. He said, they want to NASCAR wants to bring in more manufacturers. If you're bringing them in and we're going to allow different engine setups, you're going to have to make it a little bit comparable for these other cars. I still think Cadillac's coming in to replace Chevrolet, but I don't see that as a new manufacturer per se because it is a GM product. I see somebody like maybe a Honda coming in. And if they come in, are they going to be allowed to run in like a twin turbo 6-cylinder? Because these guys don't want to run these cars. They don't want to make a pushrod V8, and that's what they're going to have to make to get in there right now. So it's one of those things that if NASCAR wants to see more manufacturers, they're going to have to change the engine setups. And I know a lot of people are going to be pushing back on that because the idea of, it's NASCAR, we need V8s and stuff. Yeah, V8s are awesome. They sound great. But I think it's time to move forward and change things up and see where it'll take us. I mean, you have IndyCar running multiples. You have, the IMSA's running a hybrid style system that they run hybrid in the pits, and then it kicks on, and you have hybrid braking and hybrid assist to get the cars going. Now, granted, that Garage 56 car at Le Mans last year sounded so awesome compared to the engines, and it's going to take a while, I think, to adjust. If we had a 6-cylinder come into NASCAR, I don't think they would. I would like to see if they can make a V8 comparable to a V6 or vice versa and run those and have a different engine style. I think it would play a little bit more strategy into this, especially like if your V8s are out there and you're like, oh, well, the 6-cylinders are killing us here, but we take them here, and just see how that strategy will work out. Make it more thinking than it is now, because it gets frustrating, especially you guys hear me talk about Martin Truex Jr. and us listening to his radio and just the complaints because his crew chief, in my opinion, can't do anything to help him, and it's ridiculous. And I don't know why Joe Gibbs has sat there and let this continue. You have a paying car out there with a driver that can win races, and he's up there competing with a car that it takes forever to get right. Why not get somebody in there that can set this car up better and go from there? But anyway, that's some information going out there. That was something I heard Wednesday, Doug Yates talking about. Moving on to our weekend here, we are, again, I said Sonoma, trucks are not racing. We have Xfinity, ARCA Menards, and Cup Series. Today, Friday, June 7th, at 1:40, 3:10, we have our practice and qualifying for ARCA Menards. Then we go to 4:05 Eastern. It's going to be the practice for Xfinity Series. This will be on air at 8:30 Eastern, so it's delayed on FS1. Then we get into Cup Series practice at 5:05 Eastern on FS1. PRN is going to be having the radio. Remember, we're 3 hours behind on the Eastern time zone. So, just to give you an idea, if you're like, man, it's 5 o'clock, they're running this. Then at 6:30 on Flow Racing, the General Tire 200 will be there for ARCA Menards West. Moving into Saturday, qualifying at 3:30 Eastern for Xfinity Series on FS2. Cup Series will be having qualifying at 6 Eastern on FS2. PRN's going to have the radio on that one. 8 o'clock Eastern is the Zip Buy Now, Pay Later 250 on FS1, and PRN has that. FS2 is running a lot of the stuff during the early because we have the Phillies and the Mets on Fox out in London, and then you have you get into your heart of your baseball season. So moving into Sunday, we have the Toyota Save Mart 350 starting at 3:30 Eastern. It's probably going to be about 3:45 when green flag drops. That is going to be on Fox and PRN. SiriusXM is going to be having the simulcast on that one. So that is our lineup here. I'd like to see Truex repeat. I could see maybe Ty Gibbs. He's been having pretty strong come out here with a road course, or even Reddick. It'll be one of those to watch and see what happens there. And we'll catch you guys next week. And hope you have a good one. And stay safe out there.